When are we ever going to finish this panel? We're going to finish it today. I'm looking at it right here. I got it clamped onto the buck, and you'll see the little twinkling of the panel, the light on the panel. That's the meat and potatoes right there. That's what you got to get sensitive to if you want to learn how to finesse these panels. So there's still a little bit of pounding. I'll have to pound it out right here. I got it marked. We can see that last wire now is touching totally here, but it's a little tight right there. Well, it's a little small gap there. And then we've got a little bit of gap right there. If we move that out, that will move this in. So that's the agenda right now. That's what we got to do. Here's what a finished panel starts to sound like. Even though this isn't finished, it sounds the way a finished panel should. All right, one of the comments on the YouTube channel, somebody asked, why didn't I wheel this way here? In order to wheel this way here, you have to use a pretty high crown wheel. And when you have a high crown wheel going in here, you will get tracking marks, and it's not a pretty thing. So those tracking marks would be difficult to get out because you would only be able to get a high crown wheel in there. So that's why when you have a panel with a shape and an arrangement or area value and arrangement like this one, you would do it this way here. Now, when I was working the panel out of arrangement, I was going that way, but that was when the panel was in what I call the curl arrangement. That when it's in that arrangement, I can go any which way with this wheel. Now, one thing, I have to make it fit the buck, but I also have to make sure that that curve is beautiful. I hold it up to the light, and when I do that, I see a little bit of a strong area right here. It's a little stronger here. There's like a little peak than, say, here or here. That tells me I have to do a little bit of work in here and a little bit of work in here to blend that in. And I just pumped that out over here. I got to blend that in a little bit more because I'm knocking it out with the mallet. It mushroomed it a little bit, so I got to blend that into the surrounding territory. And I'm only going to be taking baby steps here, so I know I'm not going to get too far astray if I overdevelop it in some other area. So I'm going to work only like a couple minutes here and a couple minutes there and then check it. Problem is when you work 10 minutes without checking it. And the panel, in the process of working like this, it's starting to really polish up pretty nice too. So I'm getting that nice chrome plate finish. We are going to buff this panel after we're done with a buffer. The same little buffing wheel that I'm using. If you watch my other video on cleaning up the wheel, I've adopted that method. It's a really nice, user-friendly way of buffing. If you get it to a high shine, if there's any faults in the panel, they will scream at you. So one way or another, you have to spend the time to fix all the faults. You can fix them now when it's just the metal, or you can fix them later with filler. Filler would be with Bondo, which nobody likes, but everybody has to use. A lot of the world-class restorations, the entire body is Bondo surface and then sanded down. And I really don't think that's the height of panel work. Why that happens is beyond my understanding. I think the panels should be as close to perfect as possible. I've mentioned many times before, I go by designer's intent, and designers of these vehicles with the shapes that they created. They want to see beautiful panels. They don't want to see panels that are all filled with different types of fillers to make them look beautiful. They want the metal to do what it's supposed to do. So, and then, the argument of, well, it's so much easier to put the Bondo on. Well, if you know how to work the metal, you just get the metal straight, and then you don't have to spend all that time putting all the Bondo on. So I've done a couple things here. One, I've blended in that spot that I popped out, and two, I've blended this curve a little better. I think it still needs a little bit more, but again, the last word is always the buck. So we'll put it on the buck and see what that says. So we're going to clamp it all up, and we'll see it in a few minutes. All right, I mocked up the panel after we fit it up. We clamped it up really good, and I wheeled out those. And then also, in addition to the buck, letting the buck talk to you and telling you what to do, the other one is that horizon view, which I've mentioned probably a dozen times in this video series. So I'm sitting here, and I'm looking at this panel, and I rotate it like this, and I just watch that curve. And up here, the curve could look beautiful. As I turn it, all of a sudden I see deficiencies. So right now, I see a deficiency relative to this. I've been pounding this out because that's where the wire is, but it's a little low here, which means this is sort of like mushroom. So right in here is deficiency. So I'm going to pound that out a little more, and I've done that a little bit all along here. And then you pound it for a second, and then you give it a good observation. The panel still has a little going like this, which means it's going to need a little more work right in here. I might be able to do that with the wheel. All right, so I'm wheeling out all those little hammer marks. Every once in a while I'll come down here and I'll pull up on it because I don't want this thing turning this way. I want that nice and straight. So I still had a little concave in here, so I kind of addressed the whole region. There was a few little spots, but also the whole region still needed that little bit of attention. So I'm getting it better and better, and I'm sitting here thinking, I don't know if I've mentioned it, but I have Stuart Brown from Dorset, England, Dorset County, England. It's in the southwestern corner, lowest section of England. He's coming over like the end of the first week of November, and he's bringing his scanner. He's got an unbelievable scanner, and he has the software that you need with a scanner like that. And he's scanned cars all over the world with that scanner, and some of the most valuable cars. And he's coming over for some lessons from me, and he's offered to scan anybody's car that's in the locale. So if you're within 100 miles of my shop and you want to bring your car down to be scanned, he's offering the scanning service for a very reasonable price. That isn't $50. It isn't $5,000. It's very reasonable for a super professional scanning service, and he'll turn it into files, and you'll have the files after it's scanned. And he's done the CAD work on the AI Alpha. He created the AI Alpha all into a 3D CAD program, and he sells plans for bucks all over the world, and he's probably going to give make a couple of videos with me, and it's going to be very interesting when he comes over. So I'd like to do a lot more of that, collaborating with various people with just different skill sets or even the same skill set. In the comment section, Ron Cavell always gives me a pat on the back for my work, and I said, Ron, we got to come and maybe he could come here and we could do a collaboration on something, but he didn't get back to me. I'm hoping maybe he'll see this and maybe he'll get back to me. But I think it'd be a lot of fun. So we're just lightly wheeling this again, blending everything together, and then we're going to offer it up to the buck real soon here. It's starting to flow pretty nice as far as all the lumps are gone. And again, all of this work is unnecessary that we did in this video series. If you take the step when you build the panel, all baby steps, and don't get too rambunctious, you won't make this mistake and you won't have to do all these fixes that I have had to do. But the video series that we've done on this panel, I think, is invaluable for a lot of people. That it's very common to make all those mistakes, and then they panic and they want to start all over again. And if you start all over again without understanding what you did, you could just repeat the series of mistakes again and then have two bad panels, and that could be like 2 days of work. And then you get so frustrated, you think, oh boy, I can never do this. But I'm convinced that anybody can do it. As long as they got pretty good hand-eye coordination, they can do it. Right now, this panel is pretty sweet. It's flowing really nice. I got a beautiful curve here. There's, like I said, a few spots maybe like 4/1000ths of an inch low, and maybe another spot that's 4/1000ths of an inch high. If it's low, you can develop it up to where it's supposed to be the perfect true surface. If it's high, you can shrink it back. And you can shrink it back. I have a new shrinking disc that I use strictly on aluminum. It doesn't scratch the aluminum or anything. And we'll be showing that in use soon on one of these panels. And right now, I've got it clamped on there. And Mark can kind of maneuver around. And I'll explain the process of how I got the panel to where it is right now. So Mark's just going to show it a little bit. We got super volunteer Frank, who's no longer with us, but we try to keep him in all the videos. Still, he's helping us out. So Mark's maneuvering the camera around, showing that panel. And flat panels are one of the most difficult panels to do. And this panel, based on the wire form, now remember the wire form was done by eye. The wire form, this has a station here, a station here, a station here, and a station here. So 4 stations. And these pretty much line up, but then it comes down here about a 1/2 inch, maybe 5/8 of an inch tip in, where it ties in with this tail. And as I was working on the panel, I was trying to get all of this touching totally in the back, and Mark can poke around in the back here, that it's away from the two wires a little bit up at the top here. I came to the conclusion that it really needed a little flow going like this, because this panel looks really good and it doesn't have any oil can or anything. It's a nice solid panel. There's still a tiny little bit of live edge on the bottom, but again, when I weld that's going to shrink in and that won't be a problem. And this hasn't been buffed. What you're seeing exactly how it comes out of the English wheel. If you have your English wheels all polished up and set up really nice with the buffer, we did a video on how to tune and buff your English wheels. Go back on my YouTube site and you can find that video if you haven't watched it yet. But it's really easy to tune up your anvils and your top wheel and then polish them to a high polish. Because what happens when you wheel, you're printing the polish that's on the top wheel onto the panel, and it buffs it up like this. And this is why I like an English wheel versus a power hammer. So I made an anchoring system here. I put a couple of vice grips on the wire form. So those are homes now. Usually I just use a couple magic marker lines to home it. But I've got these anchor points so I can take the panel off and put it right back at this exact same anchor point every single time. And when you wheel in this, it's really real low pressure, and you've got to find where your defects are. So oftentimes when I'm wheeling, when I have it in the wheel like this, I hold it like this, and I let the panel talk to me. And I can still see a few little spots. There's a spot here and a spot here that are a little deficient. But primer will fix those. A lot of guys will file that, and they'll file away the tops, the high spot tops, and that makes a low spot or a thin spot in the material. If any car you're going to be building or cleaning up or restoring or whatever, making panels, you see a lot of these very expensive cars that are restored, and then they Bondo skim the entire car and then board file it. Well, that takes a lot of time to do, and it makes a big mess in the shop. If you do the work on the wheel and get everything smooth first, you can skip that step totally. High build primer on this is for all you would need. That's it. So as I'm wheeling, I keep checking. You have to put it in the light many, many different ways. And this, I look at it, and it looks like flawless. But then you bring it over here. I made this little stand like this. I just this is a couple milk crates sitting on top of one another with a blanket. And you put it on there, and then you walk 20 feet away. And you look at the panel, and the panel looks like a bulldozer ran over it. So it still has some imperfections that I can see when I walk 20 feet away. So, but those will all go out with a block sand. I could spend another hour going crazy on it and the wheel I'm using too. You look at that anvil. This anvil has like a 3/4 interface on it, so there's a 3/4 inch wide contact area. That's where all the work happens. I probably should knock these off a little bit more on the edges, and that will give you the ability to go through a panel that has a little more crown and still have the advantage of having that wider contact area. And again, this is an advantage of the big wide wheels. You have that real estate to play with to make sure that you get a really nice surface. If you're working with a 2-inch wide wheel, trying to do a surface like that on a large panel, that's very, very difficult to do. So, as you can see, once you get the panel done, you get that really solid feel about it. I'll just dance the panel around. You can see it. It looks pretty good. And then when you bring it over and offer it up to the buck, there's no tension in the panel. There it is. It's on there. So that's about it. That's the wrap up for this finale for the Masterclass of English Wheel Finessing a Panel. Thanks for watching. It's Wray from ProShaper Workshop in Charlton, Massachusetts.